Hey, this is Brian again, and I'd like to ask you to do a favor. We can't do this work without people like you, so if you can, please like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends about Bring Back the Porch.
The second I saw a rattlesnake, I was hooked. That was it. And I fell in love with the real prairies here, and within a year I had moved myself and my two kids to Maple Creek, Saskatchewan from Winnipeg so that I could be closer to the rattlesnakes.
This episode of Bring Back the Porch brought to you by Bernie Leahy, River Street Realty. Let's get you home. But I think it's safe to say that most people, if they encountered a snake, would run away from a snake. Our guest today probably would run towards the snake. Sheri Monk from Snakes on a Plane. Welcome.
Thank you.
First question, what drew you to snakes?
Well, as a kid growing up, I was always drawn towards the animals that people seemed to hate.
Really?
Yeah. So I actually remember watching Jaws with my parents, and I got in trouble for cheering for the snake. The shark.
The shark.
Yes, it wasn't snakes yet. So that was like one of my earliest memories was, definitely like, it wasn't really getting in trouble so much as they were concerned, I think. But I just didn't understand why, I couldn't understand the persecution. And so it's kind of gone from there. And dinosaurs I loved as a kid. I really loved everything. Like I really love all the normal animals too, but the weird ones captured my heart.
Okay.
When my son was about 3, he became super interested in spiders, and it was a result of one of the Spider-Man movies that had just come out. And then he at the time was considered legally blind. So all of the little spiders that I would try to catch around the house, like he couldn't see them. So I went to the store to get dog food one day and came home with a tarantula because I was like, oh, he could see that. And then from there, it was a bit of a rabbit hole. And then I just had so many tarantulas. And then I realized that we actually have black widows in Canada.
Yes.
And so that ended up culminating into a trip to southeastern Alberta and southwest Saskatchewan. And I found my first black widows. And then I saw my first prairie rattlesnake. And the second I saw a rattlesnake, I was hooked. That was it. And I fell in love with the real prairies here. And within a year, I had moved myself and my two kids to Maple Creek, Saskatchewan from Winnipeg so that I could be closer to the rattlesnakes.
Really?
Yeah.
That is a love of a rattlesnake. And we have one on the table here. We talk about the elephant in the room. It's not an elephant, but this is an actual taxidermy special of a rattlesnake.
Yeah, and it's one of our local rattlesnakes. So this is about a 10-year-old female. And she died on Samus Road. So rather than let that go to waste, I have a friend that has learned how to perform taxidermy. So I obtained the proper wildlife permit for her, and he did a really wonderful job of making her look natural. Typically when we see rattlesnake taxidermy, which usually comes out of the southern U.S., they make them look as scary and fierce as possible, even, stretching their bodies into somewhat exaggerated, unnatural positions. So it was really important to me to have a teaching tool that represented the species in a more accurate way.
Lost the tail, a rattle though.
Yes. Yeah, she did lose her rattle because hundreds and hundreds of kids and people have touched her and held her. But in real life, they can sometimes lose their rattle as well. They're really fragile, and they're always in a state of breakage or erosion. So in some ways, it's a good training tool because we can't always rely on the rattle to identify a rattlesnake.
There's a tip right there. I thought they all had rattles.
Yeah, no, they're supposed to, but occasionally they break just through wear and tear, or sometimes they're hard on them on rocks. I'm also hard on equipment. I can relate, and then occasionally, I have seen one where it's difficult to tell if it was just truly born without a rattle or if there was some sort of early life trauma that resulted in it, but it just did not have any indication of ever having had a rattle. And there is one species of rattleless rattlesnake that is found on an island in Mexico.
Really?
Yeah. So I haven't been able to go and see those yet, but that's on my bucket list.
What was it about the rattlesnake in particular that you had that love affair with?
I don't know. I'm really not sure. I don't know if it was the experience of having grown up on the prairies and what I was told was the prairies, but reality is that there's less than 1% of native prairie left in Manitoba. And then coming out to prairies that were still healthy and intact, and seeing the dramatic landscapes and seeing the black widow. I saw my first badger, which had always been my favorite mammal. So that was a big moment for me. So I think it was the culmination of everything, but the closest thing I can liken it to is this same feeling of commitment, a wonder and awe that you get from like falling in love. So I feel that attached to the landscape here, and I knew that this was home from minutes of getting here and getting out exploring.
There's one other little friend of ours here in southeast Alberta that you haven't mentioned, and I wonder if you've ever seen a scorpion.
Yes, I have indeed. The northern or boreal scorpion is our only scorpion species in Canada, and they are not considered medically significant. So, would it hurt a little bit if you got stung? Sure, but they're really fun to find, and they are somewhat easy to find after sunset because they will they fluoresce under UV light.
Okay.
So they will glow depending on like the UV light that you have. They might glow really yellow or purple, but you can look for them on south-facing slopes, particularly the Badlandsy type slopes that have some rock cover as well.
Well, how did you transform your love for snakes and things like that into a business?
Yeah, so it was. I feel like I spent my whole life just trying to get here to do this. And so initially I landed in Maple Creek because that's where my background was journalism at the time. And so I ended up being editor of the Maple Creek News because Medicine Hat didn't have any openings at the time. So they asked if I would go there. But Maple Creek doesn't actually have any rattlesnakes. And then I did end up starting my own newspaper and called The Badger, which, I mean, again, another sign that maybe I should have just done biology. But my whole slogan was digging for news, as cheesy as it is. But then I had started that paper sort of really at a time when there had been unprecedented pressures on traditional print media. So that was fun while it lasted and exhausting, and glad it didn't work out. But ultimately, I ended up then in Pincher Creek, which also doesn't have rattlesnakes. And then I transitioned my career into EMS, and then I ended up getting a full-time position as a paramedic in Medicine Hat. So finally, in like 2018, I landed in a place that was full of rattlesnakes, and I didn't have to travel to on the weekends. And then I started Snakes on a Plane. So I realized there was a need for when people had rattlesnakes in their yard, and local bylaw or law enforcement, sort of the hodgepodge of folks that were doing rattlesnake relocations at the time, they often weren't available because of other needs being met or schedules or whatever it was. So we didn't have a lot of coverage that was consistent throughout the region. So that was my initial goal. So I did get the research permit because you need to be permitted by AEP in order to do it. And then once I started doing that, the need for education kind of presented itself. Mm-hmm. And then the need from industry started to present itself. And then I ended up getting contracted to do research. So I've done research for the province and for the feds as well. So it's just kind of grown. And it just, it blends well with my life. I feel like anybody in my life becomes a snake widow or widower for spring to fall, but it is really rewarding.
How often do you get called out?
Oh, it's such some days I might get 3-4 calls.
Really?
Yeah. Other days, nothing. Sometimes it's just crickets, and sometimes it's explainable because, it might be a few days of cool, rainy weather, which doesn't necessarily mean the snakes aren't moving, but we aren't moving. Okay. So then we don't have those encounters. But sometimes it looks like the most perfect day, and I don't understand why I don't get calls. So it's completely random. So a lot like EMS that way.
Okay. What do you do with a snake once you have gone out and captured it?
So that is actually the most difficult part, is finding a suitable release spot. The goal and the permit is to release within 100 meters of the capture site.
Oh.
So and that's pretty close. It's not always achievable. But some homeowners are upset that you're not going to take it miles and miles away. But all of our snake species, but in particular our rattlesnakes, have a high fidelity rate to their den of origin. They are born with sort of a map of their neighborhood. And if you take them too far off course, they don't have a bird's eye map view of their surroundings, kind of the way we envision them. Theirs is much more at like a micro level. So I need to go around this blade of grass, and over here is a gopher hole that I can get a refuge out of the sun from. So when we take them too far off of that, they can become disoriented and not find the way back to their den in the fall. And if they don't find their way back to their den, they'll freeze essentially and die. And so you've effectively removed that snake from the population. So we do our best to relocate within 100 meters of the capture site. But with habitat loss and the footprint of our communities ever expanding, that becomes more and more difficult to do. So sometimes it is upsetting because sometimes it might take an hour and a half of hiking around, sometimes in the dark, trying to find a suitable release spot, because not only can you not just put it in somebody else's yard, but you don't want to put it too close to a busy road, and you need to be able to have some form of shelter, such as like a mammal burrow, for them to get out of the elements from. We also do such a good job of controlling or killing rodents and critters like badgers that create natural shelters for them, that they become even more attracted to our infrastructure. So we are compounding, the problem of habitat loss by the persecution of other species.
Do you ever have them come back to where they originally were found?
Yeah, I think so, because sometimes it can be difficult to recognize them, but there have been a couple of our neighborhoods where I am very sure that it's the same individual. So I am hoping to next year be able to apply for a permit to be able to implant a tag into them so I can read them. And I think it will be reassuring for the people that live in these neighborhoods, because to them, there's another snake. So they imagine that there must be just countless numbers of snakes, whereas in reality, it's probably just Frank, and it's Frank, and he's showed up again. And Frank was here last year too. So if we can do that, and we can humanize these snakes a little bit more and give a little bit more context, then our imaginations won't run wild.
The technique of capturing a rattlesnake, how do you practice that?
Well, actually...
Trial and error?
Well, with me, it was trial and error, but one of the training opportunities I offer, and it's exclusively for biologists and law enforcement, people that would have a reason to handle a rattlesnake. So we practice with eggs and really, really ripe tomatoes, so that you learn that to exert just the right amount of pressure, because they really are quite delicate and their whole body is full of ribs. And in our adrenaline-fueled state, and often when you go to relocate a rattlesnake, on top of that, you have an audience, and most of them have their cameras out, they're recording you. So you can feel a lot of performance pressure, and you've got the adrenaline going because you're dealing with, an animal. And so we can squeeze too hard. So you do practice with fragile items, and that does seem to help.
Okay. Do you ever have to rehabilitate one if it's been injured?
For the most part, if they are injured, typically we'll see that from lawnmowers, weed eaters, but most commonly cars or bikes. And they just don't do well. So typically they are just not long for this world. In the event that the injury was maybe between the cloaca and the tail where there aren't any vital organs, so just this little bit right here, then yes, I would rehabilitate. Or I have brought injured bull snakes to the Calgary Wildlife Rescue Society. I think that's the full name. They've been really great. One bull snake, in fact, had 2 surgeries. Despite that, he did end up dying anyway. So I think that what would be more practical, honestly, would be to find a way of safe euthanization, so that I could euthanize rather than, take up the resources of getting these animals to Calgary that are ultimately doomed to death anyway.
Do you get calls about bull snakes from people who think that they're rattlers?
All the time. All the time. And so I do the rattlesnake relocations for free. I never charge anyone. Sometimes they'll donate a little something, which is great, but it's not expected. I would just rather be able to keep people, dogs, and the snakes safe and have them, call someone than not call someone. But with bull snakes, I will tell people, there is a charge for that if you insist on getting this bull snake out of your yard, because they're harmless. They tend to move on their own. And I could just spend the whole day herding bull snakes, because some days I'll get half a dozen calls about bull snakes. So, yeah.
Yeah. They are an amazing creature. I remember, almost 50 years ago, interviewing a guy here in Medicine Hat. His name was John Seaman. Called him Rattlesnake John, and he raised them and kept them in his garage.
Yes.
And he said to me, do you want to go out and see them? I said, okay. And he pushed the button to open his garage door, and as soon as that door went up, they all started rattling.
Yeah.
But he had a bull snake in there, and he said, do you want to hold it? And I said, okay. So he took this bull snake, and he had a metal stool, very heavy, and he had it wrap around the rung, and he said, okay, now hold it. He said, okay, now lift it up. And he never let go. But the feeling in my hands of that snake is something that I've never forgotten. Just all the muscles and just an amazing feeling.
Yeah, they are very, very muscular. They're impressive. They're impressive animals, and I think that, and I have heard of this character before, and he does indeed sound like a character. Of course, now our snakes are all protected, so we wouldn't necessarily be doing the things that we used to do. But the other things that we have learned since his time. We have learned that, snakes, including our rattlesnakes, especially our rattlesnakes, have really complex social lives. So they, for lack of a better word, make friends. They'll choose to bask beside the same individuals year after year, spring after spring, fall after fall, and occasionally even maybe meet up with them over the summer, see how their summers are going. They will protect and help the young of unrelated adults get to safety at the communal den sites. And they do share their dens with bull snakes and garter snakes. So it would almost make less sense for them to be not social when they share their home for 6.5 months of the year. But the way we used to look at reptiles is we didn't even consider that they could be sort of intelligent or emotionally intelligent. And so once we allowed ourselves to ask the question, then we started getting different answers than the ones we had sort of pre-constructed because of our own biases.
Is there a particular time of the year when you get more calls and when the snakes maybe are more dangerous than others?
I wouldn't say that the rattlesnakes are more dangerous at any particular time of year. Really, the cycle goes, they emerge from their dens for the month of April. They'll spend that month sort of basking near their den site and returning inside for the night because it's not warm enough to disperse. After about a month or so, overnight temperatures are safe enough, and they begin their summer migration, which the rattlesnakes will migrate an average of 2 to 5 kilometers from their home den, which is really a long way to travel when you think about it, when you have no legs and you're just essentially using abs to get somewhere over cactus and all kinds of ground. But more importantly, they have to cross so many roads and now so many yards to get to their historical summer feeding grounds. So that is when they're most at risk. So this time period of, mid to late May to late June is probably my busiest. And then I see a flurry of activity mid-July. And they are all sexually mature male rattlesnakes. So I'm not sure what happens, but they all start moving for about a week, tons of these calls. And then things seem to kind of settle down again until we start approaching fall migration. So end of August and then sort of through September, I get busy again.
Let's pause for a moment so we can share some exciting news. We're proud to announce that our work here at Bring Back the Porch is getting noticed. From October to the end of January, our videos and reels viewed more than 1 million times. Some of those viewers could be your customers, so sponsoring Bring Back the Porch is a great way to get your message in front of them too. If you'd like to support our work here at Bring Back the Porch, we ask you to go to our website at bringbacktheporch.com and follow the links. Thank you for your support. I don't know if it's a misconception, but I remember being told that when they're shedding, that's when they're most dangerous because they're kind of blind.
Well, they are a little bit more disconnected from their senses, but they're also not taking risks like moving to another site. So they're kind of hunkered down in the same way that we would be if we're not feeling quite ourselves. We're not quite as likely to go, grocery shopping or for a walk. So, they may be a little bit more reactive, but I so uncommonly see them in shed, which means we call that when they're about to shed. And that's because they hunker down because they feel more at risk and they're living in the wild. So much less likely to be encountered. I would say, the most, and I hate to use the word dangerous, but the most risky time for me to handle a rattlesnake is when they're really hot. The warmer they are, the quicker they are, the more reactive they are. So if somebody phones me at, noon because they've gone out into their backyard and that's when they encounter the snake and it's a really warm day, I know I'm in for a bit of a, things might get a little western. So I'll often try to cool that snake down before I even handle it with a little bit of cool water I'll bring with me, which makes it safer for me and for the snake.
What happens if you get bit?
So knock on wood. I know I'm not supposed to make sound, but I really have to.
No,
there.
Go ahead. That one's allowed.
Thank you. I've never been bit yet. I am very, very careful. As a single mom with a rattlesnake hobby, I took that responsibility quite seriously. I do wear gaiters on my lower legs. I always have footwear that, covers my ankles. And honestly, the rattlesnakes themselves are so forgiving. A friend of mine in Arizona, where they have an abundance of different species, which is one of my favorite places to go under other circumstances, not recently, but one day I'll get there again. But he had a prosthetic leg that he used in a study, and every rattlesnake he encountered for an entire year, he stepped on with that prosthetic leg. And he found that even when being stepped on, they struck less than 4% of the time. 3.4%, I believe, is what the statistic was. So even when being stepped on, they're so forgiving. When I pick them up with my tongs or with my snake hook, it's one of those two tools that I'll use. I rarely get struck at. So, but if the worst was to happen and I was to take a bite, I would just head to the hospital. We do keep anti-venom throughout southern Alberta as well as Calgary foothills.
How much time would you have?
So the rattlesnake venom is primarily a cytotoxin, so it damages flesh. If you can think of a very something fast-moving like necrotizing fasciitis. So you just lose flesh and muscle very quickly. There are systemic effects. They do have a bit of a neurotoxin, and the degree of that can vary between individual. But unlike, some more neurotoxic species in the old world, we're not worried about having our respiratory drive shut down. Time is tissue for sure. There are a couple of complications that can happen that change that dynamic. One is anaphylactic shock, which usually takes sensitizing exposure and is more likely with a sensitizing exposure. Just like somebody that's allergic to peanuts, it's usually not the first time they have peanut butter, it's the second or the third. But with rattlesnake venom, there is the chance that you can react to the very first exposure to it. So anaphylaxis would be a life-threatening emergency, rare but potential. And also, this is why wearing proper footwear or gloves, if you're working outside, is so important, is because if the venom was deposited directly into a vein, then that changes the situation much, much different. Typically, the venom would be deposited interstitially, which is just under the skin, which gives your body a lot of time to sort of absorb it. Whereas if it goes right into a vein, it can be not good.
What about a pet getting bitten?
So yeah, that's we did lose a dog about a week and a half ago here in Medicine Hat. So it is something that happens. Since that event, and it ended up being sort of a high profile event locally here, I've heard from a number of people. From my best guess, we probably have, a couple of dozen bites of 2 pets every year between us and, say, Lethbridge, and, a handful of deaths as a result every year. Last year, Family Pet Hospital in Lethbridge started carrying the antivenom for dogs. Previous to that, we had to either go to Great Falls or to the Okanagan. Yeah, so I'm really, really glad that we have that option in southern Alberta now. But if your dog was bitten, you would want to make sure that you immediately take off the collar, because you can have complications due to the rapid swelling, obviously, on around the neck. Dogs tend to explore the world with their faces, which isn't always like the best thing. So when we get close to a rattlesnake, I really think, and I got this idea from my best friend Sandy, who's a biologist. She said one time, I think they just see us as like really weird looking cows. And like it's correct, I believe. So they see us as these large grazers. So they don't react to us unless we get in their immediate bubble, because they're worried about being stepped on, which is, why they evolved the adaptations they did out on the plains of Mexico, in the wide open, because there wasn't always shelter to get to from all these large grazing ungulates. Or they perceive a predator that wants to eat them, because there are many things that do eat them in the wild. So they perceive us as really weird-looking cows that they just have to warn to not step on them. But they perceive our dogs as something that's going to eat them, because that face full of teeth comes right towards them, and then things go downhill from there.
Okay. Services that you offer includes education.
Yeah. So I offer snake school. I just had a class graduate last Sunday. So I offer a bunch of different options, but I would say the one-day course is probably the most popular overall. There's a school session, and so we learn everything about the ecology, the different species. Most importantly, I teach people to identify, the snake that we are looking at. Is it a rattlesnake or not a rattlesnake? You don't need to be able to identify all 7 of Alberta's snake species to stay safe. You just need to know which one is the rattlesnake. So we work on that. And we also do a field trip. So we go and interact with snakes in the wild, so that they can anticipate, what do I do? How will the snake act? And they put those identification skills to real life use. And then I've incorporated a little diploma ceremony. So there's a little grad cap, and then everybody holds a snake with their certificate and it's so wonderful to see people who were really uncomfortable or afraid before, because usually by the end of the course they feel so empowered, and to see that change in them just makes me so happy, because they feel better, and that makes me feel better too.
How do people get a hold of you?
So Facebook is probably the most common one. So just Snakes on a Plane on Facebook. Also, I'm on Insta. There is a website, snakesonaplane.ca. There is a hotline that people can call for when they have a rattlesnake in their backyard. I've been able to expand this year, and I have coverage in the communities of Tabor and Drumheller. Drumheller doesn't have rattlesnakes. They have bull snakes, though. And so hopefully continuing to expand this service.
And it is Snakes on a Plane, Plain, not the movie.
That is correct. It's definitely a play on the movie, and a lot of people find it really cute. But there are also people that have never heard of the movie, and those people are sometimes a little confused, but we can bring them up to speed.
Anything else you want to add?
No, I don't think so, other than just that, I think that we can all live alongside them. They're an amazing creature. They're not out to hurt us or our dogs. We just have to think a little bit about how we recreate and use the land.
Sheri Monk, Snakes on a Plane, thank you for the visit.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Brian again, and I'd like to ask you to do a favor. We can't do this work without people like you, so if you can, please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends about Bring Back the Porch.